This week we're going to be talking about, I'm going to talk about a lot of from Genesis chapter 12 through 22. And obviously you can see at the top of that we're talking about the story of Abraham. Okay? We got everything kind of passed out. Are we good? Everybody have stuff? All right. Cool. If we have pens and paper, then there's no real need to talk. So let's focus in. If you have a Bible, raise it up. Let me see your Bible. If you brought one tonight, an actual physical, not a phone. I don't want to see a phone. Gosh, what is the world coming to? A phone substituted for the Word of God. That's horrible. All right, cool. We're going to be starting off in Hebrews. That's New Testament, not anywhere near Genesis. If you know where that is, flip open to it with me. Hebrews chapter 11. So a little bit of history on the book of Hebrews. Hebrews was written to encourage Christians in times of trials and tribulations and trouble and hard times. And then we're going to be in chapter 11. And chapter 11 is literally, it's kind of, do you ever watch Parks and Rec? Literally? Sorry. Rob Lowe really annoys me on that show. But that made me think of him. It's literally like a highlight reel. If you ever watch Sports Center, you know, they have like the items that they're going to hit on the side there. It's kind of it. It's like going through the guys that were the men of men in the Old Testament, the founders of the faith of Christianity. I mean, it hits anybody that was anybody in the Old Testament. It starts with Abel, talks about Enoch, Abraham, Moses, you know, Sarah, Abraham's wife. It talks about over far into it, Gideon, Samson, Samuel, all these people. So if you were anything or anybody in the Old Testament, you should feel good about yourself because you're in Hebrews chapter 11. But we're going to talk about Abraham, and we'll pick it up in verse 8, and it's kind of Abraham's highlight reel. This is kind of what we know Abraham as. This is what was written as an Israelite who knew the history of Israel, and so this is what it was. Verse 8 says this: by faith, Abraham obeyed. I keep wanting to say opened when I read that word. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of that same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Who wouldn't want to live in a city built by God? In verse 11, by faith, Sarah, his wife, herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful, him being God faithful, who had promised a son to them. All right, so if you don't know the story, they're really old. They didn't have any kids. We'll talk about that here in a little bit more in depth. Therefore, this is the best verse in this to me. It makes me laugh a lot. Therefore, from one man, that one man being Abraham, and him, Abraham, as good as dead. That's what I want to hear about me. Abraham was old enough. He was as good as dead. That's what he's saying. So he's got 1 foot in the grave. As at that old age, born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, and as many as innumerable grains of the sand by the seashore. So that's the cool thing is we've got the highlight reel by faith. That first few blanks on your thing here, Abraham's life can be summed up by what? Hopefully you've got it. I said it like several times in that verse, in that passage. But what is it? By faith. Wow, somebody listened. Good. All right, by faith. So his life can be summed up by faith. It is his faithfulness that everybody thinks of. That's what you go to when you think of Abraham. If you are born in a Christian home, you're raised with Bible stories, all this stuff, that's what you hear about, that's what you think about. And the reason that is because faithfulness, that is Abraham's legacy. That's the legacy he left behind for all to see, all right? And so that's kind of a funny thing to me to think about legacy, just because we're all trying to hopefully build a legacy. But what is, can somebody give me a definition? What would you say legacy is? What is a legacy? Yeah?
Something you need to accomplish.
Something you need to accomplish. Thanks for the answer. Not what I'm looking for, though. Good job, Jordan. It's all right. It's a cool hat you got on, too. Everybody turn and look at Jordan's hat. Afterwards, you can go up and spin it around with your finger, and it'll be fun. All right. Anybody else? Got anything else? And you can announce it with a clap like Jordan did. Yeah.
Something you leave behind.
Something you leave behind. You were reading the blanks, weren't you?
No.
Okay, well, it's okay if you were, because that's what they're there for you to read and look at and know. Something you leave behind. I have what you pass on. Let's go into those blanks. What you pass on to those who come after you, or something you leave behind for the people behind you to learn, whether it's knowledge, something you've passed on to them intellectually, whether it's a good example of how to live, whether it is an actual gift, so like grandparents leave their grandchildren when they die, or their children when they die, land or money or cars or whatever, houses, whatever it is. It can be anything like that. So that's what a legacy is. It's literally something you pass on to those who come after you. All right? So we've got that. And now the next thing is legacy is an important thing to God. It's probably an important thing to God. I doubt God looks at any of us and says, that child of mine, I hope they have a horrible legacy. I don't think he ever says that. It's probably not something that he's ever thought, much less said. So it's an important thing to him, and so that leads me to ask and think, what kind of an impact, what impact will you make on this world, on your high school, on your family, for him, for God? All right, so what kind of an impact will you make? In the world, we kind of got two types of people. The first are the type that look to give. They look to give out stuff. They like to give and enrich the lives of others. The second type is those people that like to take. They're takers. They just want to gain for themselves. That's their desire, is to build themselves up. And so in these two types of people, unfortunately, that's kind of, those are like the two categories in the world. It's one of those two. Are you a taker or are you a giver? Example of a taker, obviously there's many athletes and CEOs of companies and things that do good and give money away. But that's, to me, like the go-to. If you want to see somebody that wants to take the attention, that wants everything to be on him, that he wants all the credit, you go to an athlete or something like that. I think of, or even different, still an athlete, but kind of a different attention. Tiger Woods, he was this guy who, was arguably on his way to becoming the best golfer ever. On his way to that. That was what his legacy was shaping up to be. But instead, he was a taker. He looked to gain for himself. He wanted enough pleasure for himself that, having a beautiful wife at home and a child, all the money in the world, all this fame and all this stuff wasn't good enough. So he wanted more. He took from places and he had multiple affairs. And it ended up ruining not only his marriage, but his golfing career. I mean, he hasn't won, I don't think, a tournament since that whole incident that happened, and that was like 2 years ago. All right, so it's not only has it had an impact on his marriage and his family life, but his profession as well. And so it's hard. You don't want to be remembered as that being your legacy, because he was going from best golfer ever as your legacy to, man, he really screwed stuff up. That's not a place I would want to be. And so the cool thing about it is givers, for the most part, they leave a lasting impact. Those are the ones that you can remember the best. Givers make a lasting impact on you. For the past 3 years, I've gone to this conference. It's called Catalyst, and it's for kind of church spiritual leaders. And it's a really cool deal because it is. It's just all these pastors from churches all around that are huge, growing. They're like the it in the church world. They come and they teach, and so it's like you have spiritual time where they'll actually teach you, preach a sermon. It's essentially like church. You have worship. It's awesome. Country leaders from all over the country going. First 2 years we went to Atlanta to do it. Last year Bristy went with me actually, and it was in Dallas. It's a cool deal because these guys, Matt Chandler, Andy Stanley, all these people that y'all may have never heard of, but as like youth pastors or church people, like working at church, you know who they are. You know what's going on at their church, and you aspire to be somebody like them. And so it's cool to hear them say everything. And sometimes it's actually spiritual leadership. Sometimes it's, hey, these are just leadership applications. But the point is, that's what that conference is all about. And that's like the one aspect. And then there's a second aspect that they're really smart because it's like, oh, it's all these spiritual leaders. And it's like an emotional high, even though they're adults and stuff. So we're going to throw in this social injustice side to it. And social injustice is, it's people have gone and seen the world, and they've seen there are people in the world that can't afford things that we can. They've put in situations that they have no control over. There's children being used as child laborers and slave laborers, people being thrown in, young girls and guys going into sex trade, all this stuff going on. And there's this side of it that they have people come and they talk about what they're doing to stop all these things. And those are the people that, not that the spiritual leaders that are preaching aren't givers, but those are the people that they've really, literally, they've just stopped their lives and said, whatever it takes, I'm going to do something to make a difference here. And they've made the lasting impact. I could go back and look at my notes and see what one of those pastors said, but off the top of my head, the guy that I remember most from last year was this guy named Scott Belsky, who started this organization called Living Water. And his organization is a lot like Charity Water, my bad, not Living Water. A lot of what he did is like what we did at Fall Riot, where we tried to raise enough money to build a well in Africa. And I know his whole story, and how he started as he was just a lost guy in New York as a party promoter. And he was just getting drunk and high and everything every single night, to where he came to this point of brokenness before God, and he just decided, you know what the heck, I'm going on this ship overseas to do a mission trip, where he saw all these kids and adults with cleft palates, with tumors in their face sucked, and it was all apart, and it's based basically because their water was unclean, and it had so much bacteria in it that it caused all this malnutrition, that they had physical deformities and health issues and deaths in children. And so he said, that's the root cause, that's the thing I'm going to go after, and started this organization called Charity Water. And it's now blown up, and he's built, I don't know how many, the statistics on it, and he's got tons of people, famous artists, all these people that don't even know he's a Christian, he believes in God, he's doing it because of that. But these people that have no idea who God is, they bought in because he's poured his life into it so much that they have bought in and they want to be a part of it. That's the guy that has left a much better, greater impact on me from those conferences than the speakers. And so I say that to somebody in your life, somebody has done something that's been just so generous that it's caught your attention, and you remember that for some reason. You know, it wasn't anything special, but it was out of the ordinary, and they gave their heart, and they cared for you, and it stuck with you, and it made a much bigger impact than anyone who takes. And so we all want to be remembered for something, and hopefully it's for making an impact on the world around us, all right? Before we're going to get into five steps on how to leave an impactful legacy. But before I do that, I have one more story for you. I was in college at A&M. It was my sophomore year, and I pledged this Christian fraternity called Bucks, and I pledged with a guy's name was Emmanuel. And Emmanuel it's kind of a big deal. He's like a drum major in the band. Could have been a yell leader if he wanted to, gone on to be student body president, all this stuff. But he kind of picked and chose where he wanted to do, and was wise about it. He was a senior when we pledged. We pledged together. He was a senior, I was a sophomore. So he had a lot of wisdom, all this stuff, or at least I thought he did, that he had to offer. And it was a really cool deal because he was one of those guys that's really intense. There's never just a chill relationship conversation with him. He was like, so, what's going on in your life? Let's go deep with this. Like, that's how he was. And so one day we were hanging out in my apartment. Out of nowhere, these were his exact words. He said to me, he goes, Cody. And he's like really established and speaks really refined, and I can't speak like him. I thought he was going to be the first black president, and then Obama went and ruined that. So there goes those plans. But he works in D.C., and like he's in that, he's like on the track. And I'm like, yes, I told you you were going to do that. But anyway, he looks at me and he goes, Cody, he's like, what do you want your legacy to be when you leave A&M? And I just go, I had no idea. I was at a loss for words. I had no idea. I'd never thought about that. There I was, a 20-year-old kid, and I think I probably should have thought about that at some point in my life, but I never had. And so I want to challenge you guys with that question. What is your legacy going to be when you leave this place? Because I never thought about it. I want you to have the advantage to strategize and to think spiritually, physically. What are the things that you want to do and accomplish to make an impact and leave an impactful legacy here in this place, all right? So how do you do that? How do we do that? How do we build a legacy that will live on and be remembered? We've got 5 things for you. We're going to kind of look at the life of Abraham, get back to him before we get out of here. We got 5 quick things. The first thing is this. Choose today who you are going to be. Choose today who you're going to be. All right? You'll never achieve anything greater than what God has planned for you. You'll never be anything greater than what God has planned for you. And as I say that, as I read that, as I think that, I think, man, that's kind of a sad thing. It kind of has a negative connotation to it, to me. But here's what I mean by that. Not that you're nothing, well, you are nothing without God, but not that, you're never going to be anything great even with God. It's just the fact that, you know what, God has this plan for you. Unless you commit to serving Him, to seeking His will, to obeying that plan for your life, you're not going to know what it is. You're not going to see it. You're going to miss the mark, and you will never become as great as He has planned for you. If that makes sense. You'll never be as great as He has planned for you, and you'll never go anywhere near what He has planned for you without Him. So we've got to choose today who you're going to be, what you're going to be, and who you're going to follow. Abraham chose to trust God with his life. As I said, in Genesis chapter 12 is kind of where we're introduced to Abraham. I'm going to flip over there, read a few verses about this. Abraham, remember, he chose to trust God with his life. And it says, verse 1, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." All right, so Abraham, literally, he's this pagan guy, never had a relationship, never talked to God, doesn't know who God is. Any gods that he worshipped were idols that he man-made from his people, his country. And so he's literally got no idea who this God fellow is. And out of nowhere, somehow God reveals himself and speaks to him, and he just says, go. Go, leave from the place, leave everybody you know, you love, take what you have with you, your wife, your livestock, and go to this place. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but just go, trust me, obey me, do this, and I'll make you into this awesome, great nation. That's what it says. At the time, Abraham is about 75 years old, so an old guy, and he didn't have any kids. He's got his wife, no kids. She's been barren, as the Bible says, which means she hasn't had a kid. She hasn't been able to get pregnant. All right, and so this is what is said. This is the command to Abraham. And here's his answer in verse 4. Three simple words, not really his answer, it's just his action. It says, "So Abram went." So he's commanded here, you know what, you don't know who I am, you don't know what's going on, but go, just trust, go do it, and this awesome thing's going to happen for you. His answer is, all right, I'm going to trust in you, trust my life in you, God. And so he chose that day who he was going to be, that he was going to be someone in God, and he trusted him, and he left, and he did that thing that God commanded him to do. The number 2 thing is this. Don't let people or circumstances change this. Don't let people or circumstances change that choice that you make. If you're making a choice, and you've made the choice before, and you're dead set on it, you know what, this is who I'm going to be, I'm going to trust Christ, this is who I'm going to be in Him, don't let anything change that. Don't let anything change that. People aren't going to always agree with you or go along with what you say. They're not even going to speak well about you, even if you're doing the right thing. That's going to be a hard thing. It's not going to be easy. Circumstances aren't always going to be what you expect them to be. It's not going to be simple at all. If you go on, we'll fast forward. Abraham's life there, we left in verse 12, or chapter 12, fast forward to chapter 22. You know, he left and obeyed God. The trip after that wasn't simple just because he chose to follow God and trust in God. It wasn't easy at all. He went, he wandered, he went, he wandered, he followed God, he wandered the whole time. When am I going to get to this place you promised me? And the whole time, he's getting older and older, and they're still not having any kids. So he's thinking, where are all these kids coming? Where are these descendants coming from that you've promised me, but I don't have any kids to leave a legacy with? You know, where is this going to happen? And it doesn't get any easier. Finally, as a miracle, a 99-year-old woman, Sarah was, when she had her son Isaac, their firstborn son Isaac. How many of you have a grandmother that is 99 years old? None of you. You have a grandmother that's 99 years old? Can you imagine your grandmother that's 99 years old? I'm going to say that a lot because that's really old. Can you imagine her having a kid right now? Yeah, I wouldn't either. And you got to remember, like, so Bristy and I, Bristy, not really me, Bristy just had our first kid, like 3 months ago almost. And she kind of had it like the easy way. I know it's easy for me to say that, right? Because I didn't have the kid. But she had C-section, she got epidural, pain meds, she didn't feel anything. She was like, you know, the baby kind of came out, there he was. That's how it was. Easy as that. She's tough. She's really tough. But like, think about this. In that day and age, way long ago, they didn't have any pain medicine. They didn't have anything like that. This was a 99-year-old lady having a baby naturally with no doctors, nothing around, just having a kid. I don't know how that's possible. It's really quite disgusting to think about, too. But anyway, so there we are. They finally come. God has fulfilled this promise. They have their kid in chapter 21. And so they love him. They're there, loving life. He's growing up a little bit. And chapter 22 hits. And this is verse 1. Here's what it is. After these things, everything I just told you, those are the things. God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here am I. Abraham said that. And then God said to him, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So the circumstances change for Abraham. Life's going well. He's getting everything he had. God finally fulfilled that promise of descendants, of children. They're loving it. They love him to death. It's their only kid. And all of a sudden God says, all right, hey, I know everything's going really well for you right now, but I'm going to send you to another place. You don't really know where yet. Some mountain. Take your kid. Take Isaac with you. There, I need you to burn him as an offering to me. What? That's kind of something that I would be like, no way. Are you serious? That's ridiculous. So your dreams, this is the last thing, your dreams or your plans don't always line up or don't always equal God's plans. All right, here's the cool thing. Step 3 is be consistent. Here's the cool thing about Abraham. We all know, I've already talked about it, he was remembered for his faith. Consistently through his life, he showed, that key word, that word showed is key right there. He showed faith in God, all right? Here's what I mean by that. The very next verse, after God said, hey, everything's cool, you got this kid and all, go sacrifice him to me. Abraham's response is this. Verse 3. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. So here's Isaac's response. No questions. He's built a trust in God. He knows God enough to where he's been through it all. He's been through the whole, God, I want a kid. Where's this kid? We're getting older and older. It's not going to be possible. God provides and says, you know what? It doesn't matter how old you are. I'm God. I can do it. And he says, you know what? I've been through a bunch of crap with you, God. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do this. And he gets up the next morning and he takes his son and they just head out. He doesn't know where he's going. He's just going in the direction God told him. And he goes. That's got to be a tough thing to do. Here's one other thing. Consistency, sorry, we're not on that slide. Consistency is a hard deal because one, it takes discipline. Nobody likes discipline. No, when you're a kid, listen, you hear that word discipline, you start crying. You hate it. When you're an athlete, it takes discipline to be the best. And it sucks. It's horrible. But the payoff is awesome. Here's the thing. Consistency takes discipline. It even takes you doing something that you don't want to do. It's going to take that. You think Abraham, at any point in his life, thought, man, I'm going to love to have a kid one day that I've waited so long for, and then just go and give him up as a sacrifice to God. No, he's never thought that before. It takes doing stuff or something at some point that you're not going to want to do, but that's what consistency is. Point 4. Point 4 on how we live out a legacy is live it one day at a time. Live your life one day at a time. Consistency is so much easier when you do it one day at a time. Have you ever thought, when I was a little kid, or a teenager, or your age, whatever it was, I would always think like, man, I wish I'd never sinned. Like, you ever think that? Like, I wish I'd never do this bad thing that I used to do when I was a kid. And then you think, oh, maybe I can do this. This was my thought process. Maybe I can go without, saying that word for 5 minutes. Maybe I can last 5 minutes without doing it. And then you make it 5 minutes, you're like, hey, that was awesome. That was good. I didn't do anything bad. That was great. So then you push it to like 10 minutes. And then it gets to 30 minutes. Eventually, I worked myself up to a whole day. And I'll be like, all right, let's see if you can go without doing this for a day. And if you consciously think about it, day after day, one day at a time, it's like, okay, I could actually, how come we can't be perfect? Like, I'm not doing the stuff I'm not supposed to do because I'm concentrating on it. But here's our problem. Here's the great thing about Abraham. He trusted God. He knew that God was the big picture guy. He didn't need to know anything about that. We, in our puny little minds, for some reason get the thought that we have to know what God's thinking about everything. That's what it is. And we end up not trusting Him in the big picture, which doesn't allow us to trust Him in the small things. Abraham knew, you know what, God, I don't know what the plan is. You want me to go and take my son and kill him for you? I don't know why, but you've got the big picture. I've seen that. I've lived that. So let's just trust in you and do it. That's what Abraham did, and he did it one day at a time. One day at a time is what it takes to be consistent. The last thing is this. How do you leave a legacy that will be remembered, that will leave an impact? You do it by standing up for something you believe in. By standing up in the thing you believe in. By standing up for God, for the truth of the gospel. By standing up for those things. You can put many things in there, but ultimately it should be God, the truth. What you believe in should be that. Here's a cool thing. Listen to this. I'll let you finish writing for a few seconds because this is kind of confusing when I say it or when you hear it or whatever the case. Here's what it is. Here's that next little bullet point up there. It says, know what you say you believe in. All right, so let's understand that. Let's examine that. Know what you say you believe in. So you're saying, you're talking, you think, you say, you speak that you believe in one thing. All right, that's cool. That's a good thing. But we're called to do something more than just say it. We're called to know that thing. So if you say, all right, I believe in God. We're called to know God. We're called to know what He's about, what He thinks, what His plan is for us. And we're supposed to strive for that. So it's not enough to just say one thing, but we're called to do it, to know it. Here's a cool thing. In the last few verses that I want to hit on Abraham. Chapter 22 still, verse 4 through 8. It says, on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. So it took him 2 days to travel. Probably 2 pretty tough days for Abraham. Then in verse 5, then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. He said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. This paints a cool picture to me. One, because I'm a new dad and I have a son now. But Abraham, he doesn't just say he trusts in God. He chose it that one day and he's lived it by faith for the rest of his life. And in this moment, probably the most uncertain moments of his life, this son that he has, I don't know how old he is, 5, 6, 7, whatever he is, old enough to walk and talk. He's sitting there and he's saying, Dad, we're supposed to do this offering. Where's the lamb for it? What's going to happen? Abraham says to him, he says, you know what? He says, it's not about that. It's not about that. And he takes it. I like to envision this and him taking the son, kneeling down to him, getting in his face, and just saying, you know what? God's going to provide. God's going to provide this. And just in a sweet, innocent way, he knows and he trusts in God because he trusts in the day-to-day time, not big picture. And he says, and he passes, this is the coolest thing. He stands up, he stood for it so much that he's going to pass it on to his son. He's not just going to say it and do it. We've already seen he acts out his faith. He shows his faith by getting up, waking up, and going and taking his son. But it's not enough to do that. He gets there and he's going to instill these same principles in his son. The fact that God is God, he is in control, and that he is the only one that has control over this. And I'm going to trust in that. He still teaches that to his son in worship and teaching my son, God will provide. God will provide. And the whole time in his mind, he's got to be thinking, oh Lord, please provide. Please provide. I don't want to have to kill my son. I don't want to have to do this. That's a cool thing. Abraham, he meant it. He stood up for what he believed in. And he passed it on to his son, who he didn't know if he was going to have the next day or if he was about to say goodbye to him. The cool thing is, if you don't know the end of the story, God provides. An angel shows up, and there's this ram stuck in some thorns, and God provides. God stops Abraham as he's about to kill Isaac, following through all the way to picking up the knife. God stops him right there and provides the lamb. And it's this beautiful story of God providing and coming through and remaining faithful once again in the life of Abraham. It's a cool deal. The last little thing I have up there says, if you don't stand up for something, you won't be remembered for anything. If you don't stand up for something, you won't be remembered for anything. Everybody wants to be remembered for something. Everybody wants to be remembered for something. Hopefully something good. So hopefully something that lasts for a lifetime. Hopefully something that will make an impact. So I leave you with this. Those words that my friend Emmanuel said to me. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your legacy to be when you get out of J-High? When you get out of high school? When you go to college? When you grow up and you, God willing, have a husband or a wife? What do you want your legacy to be as a husband? What do you want it to be as a wife, young ladies? What do you want it to be as a mother or a father? You got to think about these things. What is your legacy? What do you want it to be? And it all starts with a choice. Who you're going to be. Are you going to be that person in Christ? Or are you going to do it on your own?